You are listening to Missed Apex Podcast. We love MotoGP.
Hello and welcome to Missed Apex MotoGP Podcast. This is a show put together by MotoGP fans pretending to be experts. We aim to have a race review show ready for a midweek commute. We may just be punters, but we love to talk. Mixed weather conditions, start line skullduggery and a sprinkling of crashes were just some of the ingredients that made up a spicy yet controversial COTA Grand Prix pie. Pecco Bagnaia took himself a large piece of that pie as his teammate was left with crumbs. As ever, I am your host Kyle Power, and today I'm joined in the virtual shed by some fellow MotoGP enthusiasts. All the way from Holland is a Dutch co-host, Jules Seegers. How's it going, Jules?
What's up, Kyle? I am very excited after this weekend, after seeing the most action so far this season.
I'm sure you are, because, a bit of a bleak start, and wow, we got a dramatic weekend. Talking about dramatic things, we're also joined by tyre-obsessed trumpeter Matt. Trumpets. How's it going, Matt?
Sometimes a slow burn is even better.
Absolutely, and this season has been gearing up for drama, and well, it started as a weekend overview. We had Jorge Martin in attendance, which was really nice to see, and Jules, doctor's bit of an update on him. It's looking like he's going to attempt to ride in Qatar.
Yeah, actually today on Wednesday they had a medical check, like a physical check and also radiology check, and it turned out that everything they planned to fix with his latest op actually worked out, and that the screws they put in were in position nicely, and that he's set to go to Qatar in 10 days. Not with a green light yet, but just to see how it feels to be on the bike, and if he gets the medical pass from MotoGP itself. So there's hope. Fingers crossed for him for the number one plate to finally return.
Absolutely. It will be the first time we see the number one plate this year, and we're all desperate to see Jorge Martin and what he can do on that Aprilia Trumpets. Can't come soon enough.
It might already be too late for Aprilia, the team, having been deprived of so much development direction from him. But I was, in reading the words, perhaps being a little more conservative and interpreting them. It sounded like to me he might get on the bike and ride some, but it's very much not determined if he's actually racing yet or not. Is that where everybody else was?
Yeah, I think he's going to give it a go, see how it is, and then have a bit of an assessment. The thing is, with the scaphoid, they just can't take any risks. If he thinks he's going to damage it, or he could, almost exponentially affect his recovery moving forwards.
Well, what I saw in the interview was that there's a little callus that starts to form where the bone heals, and they were seeing that in the images. But that's a different thing, I think, from like being functionally fit and safe to use it 100%.
Yeah, I think it's obvious that he's not. He's probably not going to win the championship this year. So what's the point in rushing back? He wants to get used to the bike. So coming in, coming into this weekend, we've got Marc Marquez obviously with a 16-point lead over his brother Alex, and Bagnaia another 31 points behind, with Morbidelli and Agura rounding out the top five. So on to practice and qualifying, and inclement weather conditions soaking FP1, and we saw the first sort of red Ducati crash for Marc Marquez with quite a nasty high side in turn 2 and aquaplaning, and he just held his hands up and said he was pushing too hard for the conditions. And if you watch it, he just slaps it onto its side in a really fast corner in the wet with no need to be pushing that hard at all. And he's actually quite lucky to get away with it because he had a fairly big high side. Seemed like he was okay, but COTA is his back garden pretty much with pace, and he was looking very strong all through practice. But Bagnaia only scraping directly into Q2 with 10th in the actual practice, but he actually seemed happy. For the first time, he said, it's the best Friday he's had this year. For the first time, he's feeling good on the bike, and he's starting to get that feeling back. So when I initially heard this, I'm like, oh, okay, well, it doesn't seem too convincing. You're 10th, and then he actually ended up only going on to qualify 6th. Didn't look too convincing, but this might be a bit of foreshadowing for later in the weekend. So he's definitely had a smile back on his face, which is really good. Another few standouts through practice is Aldeguer straight into Q2, this exciting rookie that we expect to be seeing a lot of. He's been a bit quiet. He's been a bit sort of anonymous at the start of the season, but he was looking really quick. And Maverick Vinales on the KTM as well, looking quick. And the Honda's looking quick all through practice. But Aprilia, nowhere. Aprilia looked like they're absolutely struggling. They were rounding out the bottom of the timesheets. What on earth was going on? But in qualifying, I don't think anybody was particularly surprised to see Marc Marquez on pole. But what was surprising was Digi at only 0.1 seconds behind Mark, which is crazy. Like everyone expected Mark. I think Mark did have about half a second a lap in his pace over everyone. He said he overrode and just didn't put a good lap together. But Digi, what a performance, amazing, and just showing the GP25. Because let's not forget, Digi is on a GP25 or 24.73, whatever on earth they are. He's on the mat, so he's showing that the package is good and they're coming good now.
Yeah, and it's interesting. I mean, certainly for Vinales, he won this race last year. So clearly there's something about this track that really suits his eye, the way he likes to ride the bike. Really, he gets the best out of whatever he's on. But you didn't mention one name in not so much in qualifying, but in practice that I wanted to throw out there because I had had an abbreviated viewing schedule, but I did catch the wet practice. And Miller, I believe, was the first to put the dry tire on, or the second to put the dry tire on and go on. And he was crushing sometimes on that Yamaha. And it was just, regardless of manufacturer, I was just like, oh yeah, that's why he's got the nickname he does.
Absolutely, Miller Thriller. He's known for this. He's famous for trying risky moves and going and trying them. And again, he's a bit like, it reminds me of Brad Binder a bit. He's one of these, and we'll get on to this a little bit later as well. And Quattarara's already said it once, and we'll be saying it again, that he's one of these brain out riders and can just go out, brain out, balls out, and just go mad and just go think and do it. So, but it's not just bravery. He's got a very good touch and skill in inclement weather conditions. Like, who can remember his first? When was it? Was it 2014 when he was on that customer Honda, almost a CRT bike, a customer Honda bike, and he won a mixed weather condition Asin and showed the whole world like his talent in these conditions. So no surprise at all to see Miller up there. But so Marc Marquez on pole, Digi in second, Alex Marquez, his brother, in third, Acosta in fourth, and then didn't really do much for the rest of the weekend. So Acosta, we're not really going to talk much about Acosta, so we can talk about him a bit here. He ends up crashing in the main race, struggling. He's really good and showing the pace over one lap, but we expected more from Acosta this year. This has really reminded me of Marquez's third year in MotoGP, where the first 2 years he was really strong, and in the third year it just all went wrong and he was just crashing left, right and centre. And Jules, Acosta, it almost seems like frustration that he's overriding the bike and crashing now.
It seems that he is in a bit of a no man's land. He knows the KTM isn't likely to get him any further than he was last season in his rookie MotoGP season, when he hit the stage in a very convincing and awesome way, and it almost seems like he has this "it doesn't really matter" way of going about things right now, and the disappointing thing is that last season he crashed quite a bit. I think eventually the most of all riders, and he has a bit of risk, a riding style to him, it seemed. But then he was a rookie, and everybody was like, "Oh yeah, rookie season, etc., etc." Can't really keep saying that, and I can understand why you'd be a bit disillusioned when you went to the real KTM team, the real factory team, and you don't really get anywhere. But on the other hand, if you want to put yourself out there for a different seat, for a better seat, he needs to start showing, because there right now at this moment there are a lot of riders in the top 5, top 6 that are very convincing and very fast. So it was a bit disappointing. It was cool to see him up there on the grid, but then, like you said, he kind of went nowhere.
Yeah, and it's really weird. So, yeah, I agree. I think he's getting a bit disillusioned, a little bit frustrated with the situation. He's got a bit of a swagger about him. I mean, that swagger says to me, I'd rather be riding a Ducati swagger at the moment. But yeah, he's got a bit of a carefree attitude. There has been some rumours circulating around that he might have a shot at a Ducati Trumpets. It would be great to see him on a more competitive bike.
Yeah, it would be. But having said that, if you look at where the KTMs are finishing, he's still clearly the fastest KTM rider in the field, I think. But you don't learn for your engineers, right? I've talked about this, the idea that the bike is a feedback mechanism. It's a feedback mechanism for the engineers and it's a feedback mechanism for the rider. And when they're in tune, that's when you have your biggest successes. But you're not going to, if you don't explore where the bike runs out of room for the rider, then the engineers lack the data to fix it. So somebody's got to go out there and chase the lap times. But the other thing that occurred to me, and this is just when you were sitting there talking about it now, is that at the start of the season, he was doing great. But as the developments came on and the KTM fell behind, I think he fell into that trap of chasing the lap times and the bikes because he felt he had the capacity to do it, rather than recognizing when the bike was beginning to tell him, okay, we are on the absolute limit here. You can't get away with this for multiple laps. And I made jokes about it with Honda last year. They were just like, go out, ride as fast as everyone else till you crash, and then we'll try and get another lap or two in next week. And I think that might be also kind of where he is.
Yeah, he's still trying to do that. And yeah, I think it's just overriding. He knows he can exploit. It's good into the corners, and they struggle elsewhere, and he's good into the corners. And I think you look at all of his crashes, they're all front ends on the way into the corner as he's just spanking the bike in and just asking way too much of it and going down. So we've got Marc Marquez on pole, Digi in second, Alex Marquez third, Acosta in fourth, and Morbidelli in fifth, with Bagnaia struggling to sixth in qualifying. But as we saw in somebody in the sprint, that doesn't pose too much of a problem for him. So on to the sprint review. So for the sprint then, and the first thing of note was Bagnaia's amazing start from P6 to go up the inside into turn one and take the lead essentially from his teammate Marc Marquez, and it set up that we got a great opening lap battle there. So Bagnaia gets the lead. Marc sort of manages to cut under him and take it back, but then into turn three, the really fast left-hander, Bagnaia sticks quite a hard move back on Marc, and it's really good to see this from Bagnaia. He's got the first chance or whiff that he had to have a pop at Marc, and he just takes it with both hands, shoves it up the inside of the thing, but then Marquez retaliates almost immediately into the left-hander. Amazing. It was so good to see this fighting, and Neil Hodgson called it really good on the TNT commentary, saying like people say you can't pass through here, and we've had about 3 passes already going through there, and it just shows the battle of the teammates, like really battling hard, and that was so good to see that from Bagnaia. Like he isn't taking it sitting down, but Marc equally knew that he couldn't afford to sit any time behind him. He knew he had better pace, so he forced the issue, managed to get away, and then this seemed to disturb Bagnaia a little bit because he started battling with Alex Marquez. And then Alex Marquez ends up getting him and then pulling away. And then I was thinking at the time, I was like, Bagnaia goes, he's got the feeling back. But now he looks like he's struggling again and it wasn't coming back. So he falls back to third. But towards the end of the sprint, he does start coming back towards Alex Marquez. But the big moment coming through turn, I think it's 18, the really long right-hander, the camera misses it initially. You cut back. Marc ends up being on the outside. Both Alex and Bagnaia go through. Bagnaia puts a move on Alex, Marc's in third, and then cuts back underneath both of them to retake the lead. And then the replays show why Marc was in third. And holy moly, he had an absolute whopper of a slide and somehow saved it and prevented himself being launched into the shadow realm somehow, but dropped back into third. But then somehow, from third, launches straight back into the lead again. I don't know how you collect your thoughts again to do this move like Trumpets. That was typical Marquez.
Well, it's very typical Marquez. And sort of, as you said, it was a little bit of a prophecy for his weekend, his opening crash in the wet free practice. But what was interesting about that is that was one of those where his almost crashing actually cost both Alex and Pecco almost all their momentum, making sure they weren't going to run into him if he did go off the bike. So he really So they didn't have the advantage, the momentum advantage you'd expect them to have in that situation. It made it a lot easier for him to seize control of the race again.
Yeah, absolutely. And you could hear, I think there's an onboard from Pecco's bike. You can see when Mark has the moment, or it's Alex, he has to really back out of it and get out of it. But then, so what's kind of missed, I think it was Alex slipped through, but then Bagnaia putting a move on Alex into 19, the left-hander immediately afterwards. And then when them looking at each other, Mark comes underneath both of them. And I bet both of them were just like, what? I thought you were just being launched into orbit. Like, well, what are you doing there? So Mark gets them. Mark then pulls away, gets the gap, controls it for the rest of the race. And then, so the interesting thing was happening behind. We didn't get much battle at the front there. So Alex manages to get ahead of Bagnaia and looks like he has more pace and pulls away. So Bagnaia drops like 1.5 seconds behind Alex. And then towards the end of the race, though, he starts to close Alex back in, which is a good precursor for Sunday. And I was like, it's really positive for Bagnaia. And he looked pretty happy after the race. He knows he's got that feeling back. Someone else who was looking pretty happy as well was Digi. Again, some really good battles with Fabio Quartararo. It was great to be seeing them fighting with Morbidelli. It's really good to see Quartararo and Yamaha, but my goodness, you can see the limitation. Just getting eaten alive out of the corners and down the straights. He was kind of powerless to do anything, but it's still good to see the former world champion having some fight. So Digi, awesome moves, awesome battles to go up to nab fourth place at the line. So Mark ends up winning the race, Alex Marquez in second. So the brothers again making it 5 consecutive brotherly 1-2s, which is crazy, with Bagnaia in third, but some positive feelings. Digi in fourth, Morbidelli in fifth, and Quartararo getting a fantastic sixth, which is really positive signs ahead of the Grand Prix. So on to the Grand Prix. There's a couple of topics I think we need to address here. We had a very dramatic Sunday here. So we'll talk about the start line chaos. We'll address that. We'll talk a bit about Pecco Bagnaia and is this redemption for him and how this has improved the championship. I want to squeeze a little bit of a Jack Miller topic in here because he was a bit of a hero on Sunday, and we have several honourable mentions. So let's start with that start line chaos. My goodness, I loved it. Annoyingly, I just got off the sofa ready to go and just, go and get the kettle on and get ready. And then I heard pandemonium kicking off and I run back in. I'm like, what on earth's going on? I see Mark like legging it down the pit lane. Like they were running the ticker, the MotoGP ticker thing, and they cut it short because it come back because all chaos was breaking loose. And no one was really clued what was happening. So 3 minutes to go, Marquez has orchestrated and planned with his team to sneakily leg it off the grid. So basically what happened, it was wet. The sighting lap, they all tried it going out of one of the sighting laps, and Quartararo binned it, so he actually had a crash on slicks, and then they ended up delaying the start anyway because I think they had a few problems on the sighting laps. And then, so basically you have to make a decision there what bike you're going to go to the grid with, whether you've got wets or slicks. And in MotoGP, it's not exactly the case of just putting the tyres on. The bikes are going to be quite different. They'll use different bikes. So I don't know if it's still the case anymore, but they, MotoGP run carbon brakes. They have to run hot and you need to put a lot of load through them. So in the wet, you don't put so much load through them. So I think in modern times, they actually put a covers over the brakes so the brakes can keep temperature in. Whereas previously, not that many years ago, they used to just change to steel brakes. They didn't used to run carbon brakes in the wet. So the suspension settings are going to be softer, the engine maps are going to be softer, and the wet maps. So the bikes are different things. So you can't just sit on your wet bike and then slap some slicks on it because it's just not gonna work. You need to commit to that bike. So Marquez and a lot of people on the grid, there's only 3 people who rightly chose the slicks. They're sitting on the grid, they're obvious, and they were Brad Binder, Enea Bastianini, and Iagura, and they're in 16th, 17th, and 18th respectively on the grid. Everyone else was on wets, and it became quite obvious that it was it was going to be the wrong choice, Matt. And then that means that they're essentially going to have to make a pit stop in the race.
Yeah. So what happened was it looked wet, it felt wet, and then as they got to the grid, suddenly the temperature just started rising. And I don't know if it's a peculiarity of where they were, because I've experienced this where I grew up too, where it would rain, and all of a sudden the sun would come out, and you could literally just see steam rising off the asphalt. And I suspect it was one of those where if the temperature had stayed cool and it was overcast, the wet bike might have been the right choice. But the timing of it meant that when they were out there, the wet bike seemed like the right choice. I mean, ask Quartararo about, he went sliding off on his own completely unexpectedly and not pushing. You're thinking it's got to be a wet bike, but then you park it up on the grid and you feel the weather change and it just becomes and truly, you're right. Hats off to the people who said, you know what, we're in the back. We'll hang on the slicks. If the track changes, we're going to make up all that time and more, because that was the race that we wanted to see. That's always the most interesting race to see. But Marquez thought he knew the rules. And this is something that I'm really excited to talk about. And he didn't just say, oh, in case we'll do this. No, with I think it was about 7 minutes to go, and they have footage of him talking to his
it's amazing
crew chief. And
go and see this footage. It's incredible. It's on YouTube. You can see it all unfolding. It's brilliant.
It's so much fun. He's like, okay, we have the other bike ready, and then I tell you at 3 minutes, and we go run, and then it's no penalty because blah blah blah. And so they had this whole plan. But what I love that we've discovered since then is this whole plan was based on an entirely incorrect understanding of the rules. And if he was the only person who'd done that, he would have had a long lap penalty in addition to having to start from the pit lane. And
I think it was a ride through, actually. It was worse than that.
Oh, it was a ride through. Yes, you're right.
It was even worse than that. It was a ride through. So, and that's what makes it more amazing that, like, and he played in it, and you hear it afterwards, and I know he's been accused of being arrogant or anything, but he says, I knew people would follow me. I knew people would do it. That's why I was keeping a secret. And he was right. Like, half the grid, like, most people saw him, and it was funny. The camera from sitting behind Bagnaia, as soon as Bagnaia sees Mark run, he's like, I'm going as well. And then Acosta was like, I don't know what's going on. I'm just following them. So Mark was right that everyone generally would just follow him. But it was fantastic to hear them plotting it. Now, I've got a bit of a question. Do you think this is unsporting or just very clever? I thought he was being incredibly clever and switched on and trying to do a bit of skullduggery, because he knew people would either follow him or he's trying to pull a blinder, and he's trying to get... He thought that the race already started. There's a rule put in after 2018 Argentina where he had Jack Miller left on the grid, where the whole grid come down the pit lane at the end of the warm-up lap, and he got left on the grid and they had to abort the start for safety reasons. And it was really unfair because he chose and he took away his advantage. They've tried to put this rule into place to penalise people making late swaps. If it's within 3 minutes or something, you change bike, then you have to come and do a ride-through penalty. Now, Mark was thinking, I can force a restart and they can't do this, but the sighting lap hadn't started, so it was slightly different anyway, and there actually wasn't as many riders as he needed to come in, Jules, so he didn't actually get the more than 10, I believe the wording is, riders following him, so it wouldn't have happened anyway.
Yeah, to answer your question, was it clever or unsporting? In the end, knowing everything, it was trying to be clever, because he thought he knew the rules, but to get what he wanted, there needed to be more than 10 riders leaving the grid, which didn't happen. It was exactly 10. So he wouldn't have gotten what he thought he would get. And what he thought he would get was start at the back of the grid. And he thought, with my overspeed, I'm just going to run by all of them and finish on the podium or something. But the actual punishment was you get your other bike. You start from where you were, but you get a ride through, which is like at least
seconds.
Half a minute.
Yeah, 30 seconds. It's quite a lot.
Yeah. So he was actually saved by then Race Direction, who saw all kinds of people running through the pit lane, grid girls that were still on the grid, that they just red flagged it. But if that didn't happen, he would have gotten a lot worse than he thought he would.
So just a tiny clarification there. The ride-through penalty is because he went onto a bike with different tires on it. If he'd gone onto a bike with same tires, there wouldn't have been a ride-through. He would have simply been put to the back, I think, of the grid.
Yeah, but you'd never do that anyway, because why would you run in that? And think if
you might have a mechanical issue or something like
exactly.
that. And that's why when people are going to bring this up, that is the exact reason why they're not going to change this. Because if you're on the grid, 3 minutes to go, suddenly your ECU says bzzzt, hacked by, then you're going to roll that bike off the grid and you're going to jump on your second bike because it would be unsafe to try and ride it at that point. And that's what he was trying to take advantage of. Was it clever? Yeah. Was it sporting? If it's in the rules, then by definition, it's sporting. Did it have the result he intended? Yes. Was it on purpose? No. He accidentally lucked into the result that he wanted. And that, you know, if I was at Ducati, I'd be like, okay, who's in charge of knowing the exact rule book next time Mark gets a bright idea? Because that's a big hole for them.
Yep. You hear them. They're all talking even with Todozzi, and I think everyone had got the rules wrong. I think everyone's understanding was a bit wrong, but it's precious feet. But what amazed me is how switched on do you have to be to even start coming up with that plan and knowing it? It's just like, wow. And he knew that everybody would be watching what he's doing. He knew everyone was going to copy him. So he could say arrogant or whatnot, but I just can't believe someone's that switched on. And I love how orchestrated it was. He was sitting there and all of a sudden the quick to tap on the back to his mechanic and then he legged it off into the pit lane.
See, you say switched on, but to me, the person who was really switched on was Bagnaia. Because he's sitting there and he goes, Mark's not on his bike. He's standing next to it. And he knew, like, he didn't know exactly what was up, but he'd already caught into the Marquez bluff there. So he knew something, and he was completely ready for it. He was his second rider to get up to the pit lane exit for the what do you call it, formation lap here or warm-up lap?
Yeah, it would have been the warm-up lap. The warm-up lap was supposed to start. And this is end up lucking out, and everyone sort of, a lot of people, well, of course, there are going to be factions of the fan base who will attack Marquez regardless. So everyone's saying this is really unfair and he's caused all of this. But you could argue it was the other riders following him that caused it. If they'd just let him go, if they'd just watched him just go and just do that, then he would have been on his own, completely messed up and having to have a ride through where the others just have to do a bike swap. So actually, like, it was the others of all things, and they've all would have had the same penalty, Jules. So they kind of all escaped getting a penalty by just blindly following Mark. It was such a bizarre situation.
Yeah, that's fact. You know, all the riders who left the grid would have gotten the penalty that he would have gotten. I do understand why, and I've seen a part of MotoGP fan base wasn't too charmed with what happened, and that it was Marquez who initiated it, and I can understand that in a bit because you're consciously, deliberately putting a disadvantage on the guys who made the correct call. And if you don't even have to be like against Marquez or in whatever fan base, you can also just be a MotoGP fan, and you're getting ready for like an eventful race with different strategies, and you're being robbed of that. You're in if you look at it like that, you could say, oh, this race is sabotage now. So, you know, different perspectives, and there's something to say for all of them. So to be fair, I can sympathize with those angles.
See, that's where I'm going to disagree. Whatever Marquez's intent was, it's clear from the pre-race footage that it wasn't to have the whole race red flag because people were running around and in danger. His whole thing was he knew that people would think he had some inside knowledge and they would want to copy him. And that if he could get enough people to leave the grid, then he could swap to the dry bike penalty free. That was very clearly his plan as expressed. The reason we got robbed was because of the chaos that followed it. And there, I mean, really, the chaos is a result of the teams not being able to respond to a unique or unusual situation they're not prepared for. It's this a 1 in 1,000, 1 in a million kind of occurrence. How often do people run off the grid with less than 3 minutes left when they're the pole sitter and the odds-on championship favorite? It doesn't really happen too often, so I can't fault them for that. But at the end of the day, the decision was made on safety grounds to restart the race. And that allowed them a free swap of tires, or red flag, I guess, if you will. And I think that was fair in terms of protecting the safety of everybody on the grid. But here you can argue, and I would absolutely agree, it's completely unfair to the people who started on the slick tires. And if I'm making the rules, now that I've had this pointed out to me, I'm going to have to do some thinking about how to handle this, how to set up the rules so that in the future, people don't try and do this, because obviously it's not really a great look to have this happen all the time.
No, absolutely. And Mike Webb, race director, said himself sort of after he did an interview, and he was like, he said he didn't really have much choice but to delay the start. It wasn't really a red flag. They just delayed the start. They had to abort the start procedure and then start with a quick start procedure that they do with funny weather conditions. But the main reason why they actually had to abort the start, I think all of this going down, we only had the 10 riders, as Jules said, it wasn't more than 10. I think they could have started, but Maverick Vinales left in the middle of the grid without a bike, running down the middle of the grid and then trying to grab his bike and pull it back on. How? I mean, that's about the most Maverick Vinales thing ever. How on earth do you end up sitting on the grid and think, hang on a minute, someone's taken my bike? Like, did you take the bike from under him? What's going on? Chaos, like absolute carnage. So Maverick is running down the middle of the grid when they're supposed to be starting the Form 8, the warm-up lap, to try to grab his bike. Now, you have to abort the start then. He goes, we can't do this. Like, Maverick, what are you doing? And he said he thought it'd been red flagged or something else had happened and it was going to rain and delayed start. So he didn't know what on earth was going on. Someone had taken his KTM away and his team, and it's just no one knows what's going on. So I think it was Maverick that actually forced the restart and the aborted start in the end. It was just hilarious, and it's just sitting there. I've just got my image in the head that he's just zoning out and not realise that someone's just literally taken the bike from underneath him, and it's like, whoa, hang on a minute, what's going on here? He's like getting zoned out and then red flagged, pandemonium. So if Maverick, I think, hadn't done that, they could have started, and then that meant that everyone that fell off, the 10 riders that all went in, including all of the championship protagonists, would have had a ride through, which would have been disastrous. I think people like Bagnaia and the Marquezes probably could have come back and still got some really solid points, but there was Brad Binder, Enea Bastianini and Ayagura who had made the right choice, and they were the big losers. There were loads of people who stayed on the grid. So Marini, Quattararo, Bezzecchi, Rins, Zarco, the three we've mentioned on slicks, Fernandez, both of Fernandez, Chantra and Salvadori had all decided to stay on the grid. So even those who decided to stay on the grid on wets would have had to make a bike swap. They wouldn't have had a ride through as well. So actually they kind of would have been semi-penalised by it and would have been in slightly better shape than the others in the pit lane. But the real losers are Brad Binder, Enea Bastianini and Ayagura. And David Brivio, for the Trackhouse manager, was rightfully fuming and furious, absolutely furious, because he'd just been denied. So that was really sad. We were denied. It would have been a semi-exciting race, but a bit strung out and a bit boring, because we would have had 3 people on slicks, everyone has to have to do a bike swap, and a load of people having to do a ride-free penalty as well. So it would have been a really strewn-out grid, but we were denied the prospect of seeing Binder, Bastianini and Agura all going for it. Like, basically alone. You would have had a trio alone going for the win. That would have been incredible, Matt.
Oh, well, tell me you don't want to know the answer to that question.
Absolutely, and it's a question I'm going to ask right after I'm going to talk about Mike Webb, and to say basically he has admitted that we need to look into the rules and we need to rewrite the rules and clarify them, because if this happens again, we need to sort it out, and it is totally unfair. But yeah, the question I'm going to ask my panel, who wins? Binder, Bastianini or Agura? Matt, considering you brought it up, who wins and why?
This is so absolutely tasty, but I gotta say, I think Agura does. He had really strong, and this is why, like Bastianini pulled off a really great 7th. I think he finished 7th, right? In the end?
Yes, he did.
Yeah.
Really
and
good,
I think
really
Agura
good late
was
race pace.
a little bit behind him, but with only 3 bikes, Agura had really also great late race pace. So I don't see the advantage there. And we've just seen him. I think he's just sort of got that rookie's slight less sense of self-preservation. And then also in the early part of the races has generally been where Bastianini has had issues keeping the tires up. Like, he tends to come on to pace as he builds temperature in the tires and brakes. very carefully and then takes advantage of it at the end of the race, I think he might have struggled, especially if he got out in front in the free air to really just make that happen. So for me, I'm going to go for Agura, but that's also just because I like him.
Oh yeah, also yes, cool. Jules, who was going to win and why? So we're saying who's going to win, assuming that it goes normally and these just three get off in slicks.
Right. So we don't take into account that Binder had this technical issue and didn't finish.
No, or was it? I can't remember. It was a bike tech issue then. Is that why he didn't? Yeah. Let's ignore that. Let's assume Binder is staying in for the whole race.
I'll ignore that. I'd like to follow Matt's thinking. Like by the time Bastianini would get his tempo going, Ogura would have been, rookie style. No worries. Just go ahead, and he would have been far away enough. But for argument's sake, let's say I was very charmed and entertained by Bastianini's race pace and how he also last Grand Prix weekend from a pointless position at the start of the race, just crawling his way up. So I envision 2 laps to go, back straight. And there comes Bastianini dragging behind Ogura and overtaking him with 1 lap to go.
Bold. Yeah. Okay. So Matt's gone Ogura. You've gone Bastianini. Well, that leaves Binder for me. So assuming he's not got a tech issue, these conditions have Binder written all over it. And who can forget the crazy staying on slicks in the wet ring? He got to Austria a few years ago, which is absolutely amazing. So yeah. But Binder does break down. So my first answer is, if that doesn't happen, I reckon Binder will get it. But I like Matt's theory, and I really like him. Agura. I think that's such an amazing story of a rookie winning. I would have loved that. So I would have loved to see Agura winning. But that's enough about all the start shenanigans. Let's move on, and we, for once, can talk a bit positively. Well, for the first time this year, and I'm sure this is not going to be the last time. Pecco Bagnaia. Was this Bagnaia redemption? Like I said, in practice, he alluded to he's got the feeling back. He's feeling happier and a bit better. There was quite a funny interview with Todozzi at the end because he was like, well, I don't know why. You'd have to ask him how he got the feeling back because the bike's the same. It's just not the bike's the same. So I don't think he's made that setup changes. It's just clicked, and I think he's got there, which is good to see. And this was a round that he was expecting to be massively damaged limitation mode. And it looked like it this weekend. He looked like he'd been struggling. He didn't have great pace in the sprint, was convincingly sort of beaten. But yeah, Jules, he had a great start. And again, Sunday looked like a different rider.
He had 2 great starts this weekend. The sprint start was actually even a bit better because he entered turn 1 in first place, starting 6th. Sunday was a bit different, but still strong enough, taking P3 immediately. Is it redemption? I think from his point of view, yes. As in he was able to put up more of a fight than he was in the first 2 Grand Prix. He did it at Coda. He left Coda with a lot less points deficit to Marquez than when he came there. And Coda was supposed to be Marquez's finest hour so far because we all assumed that this is his circuit, etc., etc. And he led the race last year on the GP23. So he must have braced himself for another battering, and probably P3 is the max. But he left there with 11 points behind Marquez. And that's just a lot better than he would have expected. Has he redeemed himself compared to Marquez? I think it's too early to say that, because if we're being fair, it still seemed that whenever Marquez won it, he could pull a gap.
Right. So it's an important thing here to talk about the word redemption a little bit. Because if I redeem myself, that's a positive act I take. It's a step forward. It's not down to the luck of some other competitor taking themselves out of my way. So this is an important question. Did Bagnaia redeem himself? And I think the evidence, the answer is just absolutely clear cut. Yes, 1,000% he did. And here's why. Because it's not just that he got the feeling back, but you can also see very clearly, I think on the Sunday, he got ahead of Alex and stayed there. We've not seen that
That's
before.
the key.
And to me, that's the everything. Yeah, he took it to Marquez at the start in the sprint, and if he'd had a little more luck, both he and Alex would have been in front of Mark, and Mark would have really had to work to catch up with not a lot of laps to make it happen. And we've seen Mark struggle to pass his brother and with a lot of laps left. So that could absolutely have worked out for him. Some of that is luck, but some of that is also the bike beginning to work the way he likes. The second thing, and this is where, I wander into this territory a little bit, is really, you got to know there's a tortoise and there's a hare. And if you know which one you are, then you're on track to win the championship. And if we look at Bagnaia across the years, he's had the best start to his season he's ever had.
Yeah, good point. It's crazy because he's a slow starter, isn't he? He is a very, very slow starter the last couple of years and even his championship years. So that's a great point.
And he's not dropped. He has finished absolutely at the top level of what he was capable of achieving in every single race this season. You can't say that about Marquez now because he absolutely hasn't. And this is the thing. The other thing about Marquez is this Coda, his playground, right? He's thrown away his entire margin he's built up on what should have been one of the easiest races for him to increase it. So he has no margin of error. He's not even leading the championship anymore, right?
Yep, that's the thing. So he's lost the lead of the championship to his brother. So we're on the Bagnaia section, but we'll lump in Alex and Mark. We'll talk about the Marquez as the general Ducati and championship fight here. So yeah, he's ended up, so he's 1 point behind his brother Alex, and Bagnaia is only 12 points off Alex now, the Alex Marquez, and only 11 behind Mark. And Mark's himself feels like, massive. This is, it was a huge mistake, and it kind of undoes his perfect run that he's had. Like he's on like for a record breaking season. He's completely undone it, and it was just taking too much curb. And he said himself at the end in interview, it's frustrating, and he actually said this. Like he was like, the race was over. I was just controlling the gap and I was just cruising. He didn't need to take that much curb. He clearly had pace advantage over Bagnaia. So when Bagnaia got through on Alex, which is a great move, by the way, and just proves, to go back to Bagnaia, that he has got the feeling back, because that was such a hard braking down there. And this is where he gets a lot of his advantage. Jules coming on to, and he passed Alex Marquez. He managed to pull away a little bit. But when he passed Alex, he was 1.4 seconds, and this is on lap 4. This is 1.4 seconds behind Mark. By lap 9, just before Mark bins it, so 5 laps, Mark's pulled an extra second on him. Jules.
Yeah, you could see that Mark was trying to increase that gap. Looking at the lap times, you can see that the lap that Bagnaia takes P2, Marquez increases his pace and drops into the 2:02 lap times, where he was lapping 2:03 before that. And again, it took, like in the sprint, it took Bagnaia some extra laps to be able to match that pace. And when he did, on lap 8, is it a coincidence? Is it pressure after all? When he did, and Marquez saw on his pit board that he wasn't increasing that gap anymore, that was the lap when he crashed out. I think it's a bit cheap to say like, he can't perform under pressure. What we can't deny is that the moments where Marquez has been under pressure, and there have been only a few this season, which was when he couldn't catch Alex in Argentina as fast as he was able to in Thailand. He could toy with Alex in Thailand. He already made a mistake trying to overtake him, and he ran wide. Eventually, he did overtake him. But on the sprint, on Saturday in Coda, there was this massive, almost high side, and then on Sunday he had this mistake. So, in that point of view, Bagnaia so far has the best start of his previous seasons, but he stayed on the bike as well in all 6 races, and that's a huge difference from especially last season, for instance. But what I think will be also a huge boost for him is that, like you said, Kyle, the bike was the same. He didn't revert back to a GP 24.7 or the old GP 24 like he was talked about after Argentina. He's still on the same bike, the same spec as Marquez. And that's a huge difference. So it was just the setup changes that helped him. So yeah, I feel he's going to Qatar with some less pressure and in a much better shape.
So I like the idea of pressure. There's 2 kinds of pressure when you're leading a race. One is the person behind is as fast as I am, and I make a mistake trying to be faster. The other kind of pressure when you're leading a race is you just lose concentration. And I think that's what happened here. I think he got seduced by the feeling of that bike into starting to run dry lines, but the curbs were still wet and he should have known better. And it's an easy thing to do, to get sucked into when you're competing, to do something like that. And that's going to be his battle. It's going to be with himself and as much as it is with Bagnaia. And right now he's winning in points terms, but I think in terms of championship terms, I think Bagnaia is actually winning because he's absolutely at the peak of his performance in every single session.
Yeah, that's the thing. It's the first sort of seismic shift in momentum that we've seen this season so far, because it's all been one-sided. It's now shifted towards Bagnaia, who's catapulted himself up into the game. So I'm just going to answer the question of, do you think it's a pressurized or a forced mistake? No, I think it was brain fade. He was comfortable managing the gap, had pace on hand, and just lost a bit of concentration. He was so comfy, and this can happen. We've seen this in various sports. We've seen this in various sports of people losing concentration and going down. So I don't think he was forced into the mistake. That's why I was sort of quite frustrated about it, but not too worried because he knew he had the pace in hand. So this is Bagnaia now going to Qatar. That has traditionally been very, very strong, and this puts even more emphasis on now. So Jules made a great point. The pressure's now off of him, and now they're going into Qatar. So Matt, sorry, you had a tiny point.
Well, yeah, I just want to talk about this. Jules made such a great point about the race pace. It's the start. And what I don't know is he overheating the tire at the start, Bagnaia, and having to manage to get the pressure back down? Or is it the case where Marquez is just simply more violent? I'll use that word because that's what puts energy into the tires faster. He's more violent and gets the tire into the window quicker. But right now, looking at the pace for the rest of the race where they both ran laps together, the difference is mainly at the start. And if Bagnaia cracks that question, well, I mean, I think we're already in for a pretty good year, but it's going to be extraordinary to watch if he does.
Absolutely. I cannot wait for Qatar because, you know, as much as I'm a fan of all the riders, I am partial to Mark, and I was kind of half of me wanted Mark just to go and obliterate everyone because we've never seen it before and just win every single race, unprecedented. But now I'm actually even more excited about the season. I think this is great. I want to see Bagnaia fighting. I want to see them going back, and we got a little window into the future of this in the first lap of the sprint. But Marquez's tiny mistake, 3 inches too much over the curb, and it's not the first and probably won't be the last time that 3 inches has ruined a weekend. So moving swiftly on, I will do a host interlude plug here. So if you like the show, why not give us a follow on Twitter and subscribe on YouTube? You can follow us at Twitter at Missed Apex Moto, or you can search for us as Missed Apex MotoGP on YouTube, or perhaps you'd like to tell us how wrong we are or how we shouldn't be dropping rude jokes into the middle of the show. So you can send us some feedback, and you can email us at missedapexmoto, well, no, it's just missedapexmoto at gmail.com. That's missedapexmoto with a capital M at gmail.com. Now let's move on. We've talked about the Bagnaia stuff enough, and somebody we haven't mentioned in all of this, and I'll quickly just get him in there now so people don't shout at us too much via the emails that you're all sending in. Alex Marquez. He's leading the championship. He's been absolutely solid. He's P2 again. He's been like 6 consecutive P2s now. We should give him his own section here, really, and say how solid he has been. But positive signs for Bagnaia again. He actually beat Alex, and he's on top of Alex now. But Alex has been a revelation this year for me. But somebody else who has been a revelation, who I want to shoehorn and talk about here, is Jack Miller, because I don't know how many times we're going to have a chance to shout about Jack Miller. He's one of the surprises of the season. Jack Miller, yeah, and I was one of the people outspoken against Jack Miller, and as much as I like Jack Miller, he seems like a great guy, I don't think he should have got that ride, really, and I thought he was maybe depriving that ride. He's proving us wrong. He's proving us completely wrong. He's been sort of top Yamaha on kind of pace again, Jules. Pramac, yeah, brilliant. It's brilliant, and the bike looks gorgeous in the Pramac purple. It's all good.
It's a great color combo, the Pramac purple with the Yamaha deep blue color. And indeed, I mean, last season, I think together with Franco Morbidelli, Jack Miller was the guy who probably a lot of people would have, pulled up their shoulders a bit like, he hasn't got a ride for next season. Yeah, I get that. But boy, has he proven everybody wrong. And funny thing is, it shows how good a team Pramac are. We kind of knew that, but there was always this like, oh yeah, but they have a Ducati, but they are outperforming the factory Yamaha team. But also this was actually the first top 10 finish that Jack got this season. But still, he has made this great impression.
Wow.
And he's been a bit unlucky in different races.
Yeah, because the headlines are there. He's always seemed there. But crazy, you pointed out, it's a great point. It's the first time he's actually got a top 10, Matt. But in my mind, he's been in like the top 10 all year.
Well, he oftentimes looked like the lead Yamaha driver. And I mean, geez, when was the last time a privateer team beat the factory team in anything? Oh, wait, it was last year. And it was the same team. So maybe we could have seen this coming a little bit. I don't know. But what I love about Miller, and you're right, he did seem kind of washed. This has absolutely invigorated him. The troubles the Yamaha have play into absolutely his wheelhouse as a rider. They're struggling with this rear tire, getting the power down, getting the brakes to work, and it just works for him. He can manage the bike better than anyone else in those conditions. And that's why I wanted to bring up the practice earlier in those mixed, weird, slippery conditions, which I think is pretty much the fundamental operating window of the Yamaha right now, regardless of whether it's dry or wet. That's his genius. He manages the bike better than anyone else. But this is also why he doesn't have the top 10 finishes, is he will fall off it quite a bit doing that too.
Absolutely. And yeah, Quattararo said it. I think it was after Thailand. I think it was like, I think it was after the first round in Thailand. It was like, I looked at Jack's data why he was so quick, and in qualifying particularly, he goes, he just took his brain out. He just took his brain out and was just taking crazy risks. And this is typical Jack Miller riding, lots of bravado, very brave as his riding. But yeah, when he stays on it, it's really quick. And maybe it's sort of showing, maybe the Yamaha needs to be ridden a bit more by the scruff of the neck. And I just wouldn't have thought that Jack's riding style would suit the Yamaha at all, but it seems to do. And Adam Rosales brought up our very own Adam Rosales, who was in attendance at COTA the whole weekend and was giving us live feedback and reports from trackside, which is very, very welcome, which is good. He made a good point in our group chat that should Miller be on Rin's bike? Should Miller be in the main factory team? Because what's going on with Alex Rins? He was just nowhere. And I made it in our pre-season show. I stuck my neck out and made my wild, crazy prediction that Rins was going to win this race. God, that's a tongue twister. So Rins was actually going to win this race because he's a COTA specialist, and he was nowhere, Jules. Just what's going on with Rins? Like, yeah, should we shoehorn Miller? I say we as if we've got any influence. Should Miller be shoehorned into the factory team?
There's a lot to say for that at this point, isn't there? Alex Rins, and it's actually a really sad story because he injured his leg severely, and it played in parts all of last season. But I remember a report from winter testing in January 25 that stated that he was still walking around with a crutch.
Oh, wow, really?
Yeah, I mean, in what kind of shape are you? Should you even be riding a MotoGP bike? And maybe that was a momentary thing, but still, something is clearly off with him, and you'd almost feel like, should you protect him, rinse from himself, and give him a break, and put a guy who is in good shape on that bike. On the other hand, Miller, he's riding the Pramac like he's in his second youth. Who says he can do what he can on the factory Yamaha? And I don't mean that in disregard to Miller, but maybe that bike is just a lot worse than the Pramac.
Well, yeah, but they're the same bikes. They're going to be 4 factory bikes essentially. The thing with Pramac, we've seen Pramac is pretty much almost a factory team. So we usually say on this thing when we're talking about the private team and the factory teams that we know they're essentially always at the start of the season the same bike essentially, but Yamaha have concessions as well, so they're throwing everything at all the bikes to get as much data as possible. But with the factory teams, they usually have more data engineers, more engineers looking at it, piling through that data. So the factory team should always, in theory, be an advantage. But we're going to have to move on from Miller a bit because we're rapidly running out of time, and we want to get into some honourable mentions because there were quite a few honourable mentions during this weekend. So quickly, Aprilia looked to be having an absolute shocker, but Bezzecchi salvages P6, which is a really, really good ride. I want to talk a little bit about Aldeguer. We've been really excited about Aldeguer coming in, and he's been a little bit flaccid at the start of the season and not really finding his feet. But this weekend, particularly in the difficult conditions, he really found his feet and was really quick. And in the main race, he had a great battle with Zarco. I mean, Zarco's really aggressive. Aldeguer is showing that he's not afraid to get his elbows out, and they had some fantastic passes fighting Jules. It was really, really good to see him battling. And Aldeguer, in the end, gets all the way up to 5th, was massively hunting Miller down, gets past Miller to get 5th, but then bins it with 3 laps to go, unfortunately. But what a great race from him.
It was such a shame because he would have had a great finishing position, and it was good to see that he had some pace left in the latter stages of the race. But overall, good to see him there because he's still 19 years old. He's just so young still, and then making a move from Moto2 to MotoGP. On an amazing bike because he's riding the GP24.
Yeah.
It's no wonder it took him a while to get adjusted to it, but it was good to see him. Shame he crashed out, but at least it gives us something to look out for. And imagine if he can get up to speed and do what Alex Marquez is maybe doing. The top 4, 5, 6 places are going to be wild.
That's what we're kind of expecting from him, Matt, really. We were kind of expecting him to come in and start getting the thing. I think we've even had predictions that he might be nabbing a podium or the odd win. We might see it a bit later on, but he had a little bit of a shaky start, but he was looking super quick this weekend.
Yeah, well, this is classic rookie, isn't it? And this, to me, differentiates his performance from Agura's performance, is that Agura on the not best bike has been riding like someone who's been on a MotoGP bike for a while, whereas he, for men, is doing exactly what I'd expect. He's fast and he's a bit crashy. But my view on rookies. It's you got to give them like at least a season, if not 2, before you can really evaluate where their full potential lies. And what we saw at Coda was the first real, yes, this is the correct decision to put him on this bike. And let's hope for many more because he's got a lot of talent.
Absolutely. And that's the thing about rookies. You do have to let them crash and go and do the thing. But I think the teams will be happy that they crashed being really competitive and going out. And I don't think they'd mind so much. They're like, yeah, okay. If he crashed out of last place, then they might be a bit annoyed. But it was really cool to see him. And just to see, rookies getting their elbows out. I always love to see that. Somebody else who got their elbows out was Bastianini. Amazing ride up to 7th place, past Zarco, which unfortunately Zarco tipped off after that, which was not really much justice. But one cool thing about Bastianini was he actually had a positive interview, and he said for the first time he's starting to feel good on the bike, and actually goodness coming to with him from where he was in Thailand, saying that this bike is just incompatible with me. What a turnaround. It's really good. So great to see him up in P7th. Agura had a really strong fight back in P9 as well. And we have to talk about Digi. What a great weekend from Digi. P2 in quali, P4 in the sprint, P3 in the race, and is still not entirely fully fit, and he's going to be getting better and better. So hopefully we will get to see him in the mix. And now Jules, you've come up with a great fact for this last little thing we want to talk about. Hondas were looking great at the weekend. And they kind of faded a little bit in the race. And Mir had his now customary crash now. I think Mir, wow, he likes crashing. But I'll let you deliver it. What's your crazy Honda fact, which I just blew my mind when I read it?
Yeah. I mean, it's actually great that we can say this, but Honda are actually in P2 on the constructor standings. So the team that was abysmal last season, who looked way off in winter testing, are actually in second position behind Ducati, leaving behind Aprilia, the Yamahas, and the KTMs. And they could have been even more comfy in that position if Mir and Zarco hadn't crashed on Sunday. But yeah, it's great. And it was helped by Luca Marini, who took his first top 10 finish for Honda. So yeah, things are looking bright for our Japanese friends.
Absolutely, and that's great to see. And wow, how wrong were we, or I in particular, in our season prediction and our sort of like shows where we're just saying Honda look like they're going to be last, nailed on last and struggling. P2 in the constructors, that is absolutely bonkers. Also, what's bonkers is how close the championship is now. From looking a bit doom and gloom and not very good, we move on to we've got Alex Marquez on 87, just 1 point ahead of his brother Mark, who is just another 11 points ahead of Bagnaia. And already there is a pretty big gap between Morbidelli in 4th and Digi in 5th. So that's a really cool dynamic to watch. The battle between Morbidelli and Digi, the two teammates, and can they get closer to the top 3? And can Alex Marquez hold on? So very, very quickly, because we are rapidly running out of time, we're going to do some awards. Trumpets, who was your rider of the weekend?
Jack Miller.
Can't argue with that.
I think given the bike he had and the results he got and just the panache he displayed all weekend long, I think Miller got more out of that bike than anyone else got out of their bike the whole weekend.
Yep, that's fair. But I'm not happy with you because that was going to be my one and you read the notes and stolen it. Thank you. Jules, who's yours?
I'm going for Digi. Qualifying position 2, being 4th on Saturday, 3rd on the podium on Sunday. Great result for him, and I'm really excited for what he's going to show us for the rest of the season.
Absolutely brilliant. Mine, I'm going to have to give it to Bagnaia, really. I don't just purely for flipping round the results and doing that and keeping his head, and when he looked like he should have been struggling and he wasn't, and he's closed that gap up and now he's got the momentum. So fair play, Pecco, and you've done us all a good favour in the championship. Well, I think Mark did us all a good favour in the championship by binning it, but Pecco being there and being in a position to collect the points, brilliant. Moment of the weekend. Matt, what was your moment of the weekend?
Oh, it had to be Marquez saving that high side in the sprint. Like, wow, what was that? And geez, how many times are you going to high side it? And it's like, again, this is the thing that has always impressed me most about him is that would have sent any other rider well off the circuit.
Yeah, it was. That was spectacular. We'd got so far into the review, I completely forgot that even happened. That was really good. So, Jules, what was your moment of the weekend?
My moment of the weekend, and it's maybe a bit boring because I'm staying with Digi, but his moves on Morbidelli and Quartararo in the SS section, I thought they were great. Absolutely, I licked my fingers while watching that. Excellent.
My moment of the weekend, it has to be Marquez's start line antics and the plan and the preconceived plan. I love a bit of skullduggery. I love people trying to outwit and smart, even though it ended up probably not being the smartest move in the end. I just loved the bit of drama and a bit of chaos. Regardless if you hate it or not, it was entertaining. It probably did deny us though. Ogura, who definitely would have won. So why don't you follow my panel? Jules, where can people follow you?
You can follow me on Blue Sky, and the handle is Jules on Racing.
Excellent. Matt, where can people get you?
On pretty much any social at MattPT55.
Marvellous. And you can follow me at KylePowerF1 on Twitter. I still need to move over to Blue Sky. And why don't you give the show a follow as well? We're also on Twitter and YouTube, as mentioned before. Right, so we'll be back in a couple more weeks when we've got Qatar next. And I am really looking forward to this battle as the championship heats up. As always, thank you very much for listening to Mr. Apex MotoGP.